In 100 years, will consciousness just be a subscription model for the ultra-wealthy, kind of like $1 Million Shave Club, my new company, exclusively for the rich? Why buy a razor for $1 when you could get the same razor for $1 million? Because money means nothing to you. $1 Million Shave Club, death to peasants. Do you want to be immortal, or at least 150 years old? What is the Dark Triad, and do you have it? Or is that just the title of the next Batman movie? In today's rant, we're going to cover immortality. Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? Can you escape reality and be the first human to live for 300 years? Or your children, perhaps?
Are they children? Maybe.
Before you shrug it off as pure science fiction, remember this. Many ultra-wealthy are seriously pursuing this idea right now like it's the last roll of toilet paper in a 2020 grocery store. So let's shuffle on our immortal coil and dig in. Look, I know you greedy little monster. You want to be immortal because what could be more fun than living forever? Watching the sun rise 1,000,000 times, eating the same combinations of the same foods endlessly, standing in line at the DMV for centuries instead of hours as you renew your driver's license for the 10,000th time. Yes, sirree, who wouldn't want to be immortal? Well, when it comes to where we're at today with serious discussions of immortality, there are a few lines of inquiry that science is exploring. Option 1, we could prolong our life in the bodies that we have. I like this idea best. When your car has a flat tire, the car doesn't just die, you just replace the tire.
It's only a flat tire.
If we could just stop any individual thing that might kill us, we might be able to extend our lifespan indefinitely. At least that's the theory. Option 2, we could upload our consciousness to another vehicle entirely, uploading our mind to another body, a robot, or the cloud, whatever that means. Or option 3, some people seem to believe that we can freeze ourselves today, thus preserving us for a magical time when our planet will discover, after thousands of years of waiting, that icy wiener should ride once more.
Icy wiener? Oh, crud.
But of course, immortality is tempting for all of us. Imagine getting into a fatal car crash and just restoring yourself from a time machine backup. Who wouldn't want that? I'll spend the least amount of time in this video on cryonics or freezing the body, since Clive Cohen, a neuroscientist and professor at King's College in London, says that, quote, "It's a hopeless aspiration that reveals an appalling ignorance of biology," unquote. Ignorant or not, right now around 500 people are preserved in liquid nitrogen globally, the vast majority in the United States, of course. The only serious way that this might work is if we could somehow either scan a frozen body or brain or upload it somewhere else. So I guess we'll just roll this possibility into the upload your mind option for the purposes of not having an hour-long video here. There's a long line of dubious immortality companies out there, from people peddling compounds designed to kill off aging cells to companies like Alcor.org charging clients hundreds of thousands of dollars to freeze their brain to be defrosted in the future, something Alcor says has a non-zero chance of happening. While they may be right, I'd personally wager that it's about the same chance as the great spaghetti monster coming down from the sky and telling us all that donuts are the one true religion. But I'm an ignorant idiot, and I've been wrong before. These days, it's hard to separate science from science fiction, especially when money's involved, because the super intelligent beings of the future will have nothing better to do than reanimate Karen's brain, sample number 24995, when they could just as easily pocket that money and she'd never know, dumping her body, say, in the garbage can behind a futuristic Stuckey's. All right, that's a little grim, I'm gonna dial it back, but the longevity schemes in the real world today range from earnest scientific research to blatant cash grabs, because if there's one thing we know for sure, it's that rich people will spend all their money to live just a little bit longer. This makes the atmosphere ripe for hucksters of all kinds. But are any immortality methods actually feasible? You might be thinking, why should I care about this? Well, are you bothered by the fact that the most likely people to achieve immortality or an extended lifespan are the richest among us? Conversely, are you excited by the possibility of living forever as the perpetual servant to the world's first 600-year-old quadrillionaire whose interest and power can go untaxed and unchecked for eons? Again, powerful people are seriously chasing after immortality like it's the last yard garita in Vegas. So tasty, mostly sugar though. Combine immortality with our capitalist system and you've got yourself a powerful cocktail for something. So let's start our discussion today with why we age and how we might be able to avoid it. No, seriously. First, can aging be reversed? Sophia Capsiani and her team tried to use AI to prolong the lifespan of Canorhabditis elegans, a translucent worm with a similar metabolism to humans. Coincidentally enough, on our first date, my wife referred to me as a translucent worm with a similar metabolism to a human, and I'm glad to say that her opinion of me hasn't changed much since then. About her study, Sophia said, aging is increasingly being recognized as a set of diseases in modern medicine, and we can apply the tools of the digital world, such as AI and machine learning, to help slow down or protect against aging and age-related diseases. That's pretty sweet, huh? The point here is this. We don't die from aging per se, we die from something else, either a disease like pneumonia in the case of the immunocompromised, or organ failure, or some other critical system shutting down. Some scientists now suspect that if we can treat all possible causes of natural death individually, we might be able to greatly increase our lifespan. But is there a limit to this? And if we succeed, will we be happy to live to be 150 when millions to billions of us are depressed and suffering right now? Because what does it matter if you live another 50 years if the thought of eating the same damn breakfast 8,250 more times sounds monotonous as hell? Laura Carstensen demonstrated in her socio-emotional selectivity theory, or SST, that emotional regulation isn't tied to our physical aging, meaning if we could reduce or remove the physical problems with our body, we could conceivably get happier and mentally healthier living beyond our current lifespan. To live longer and to be happy doing it, the ultimate goal, we may have to think about our body and our mind separately. One research paper titled Psychoage and Subage, Development of Deep Markers of Psychological and Subjective Age Using Artificial Intelligence, uses AI to separate one's psychoage, their chronological age, from their subage, how they feel about their age. While both are a predictor of one's mortality, it turns out that how we feel about our age is a greater predictor of our own death. This is good news for my therapist, who will look forward to hearing me whine for another 100 years while making zero progress. This is all to suggest that the mental component of a longer lifespan is just as important as our physical body. In Yuval Harari's Homo Deus, he discusses at length how all of our social and economic systems are designed around the current human lifespan. Would monogamy still make sense if you were married to somebody 120 years after your kids retired? If you and your great-great-grandkids were still alive and looked the same age, could you work at the same job for over a century? How would we deal with a growing population if no one died? Would the elderly have discounted bus fares for centuries? Some people believe that we could stop all aging. Others, like researchers from this Smithsonian article, believe that there's an upper limit to human lifespans of around 150 years no matter what we do. Of course, why do so many of us fear death and want to avoid it so badly? After all, Steve Jobs said in his famous Stanford speech,
"Death is very likely the single best invention of life. It's life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new."
When you take that away, are you taking away evolution, growth, and change? And above all, are you just opening the door to the possibility of a Harvey Weinstein living forever? Because let's be real, people, it's folks like that who are going to do it first. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Now let's get to telomeres and aging. As much as it pains me to say this, we can't talk about death and aging without talking about biology. So dust off your freshman year and try to remember how cells work. In brief, cells in your body are constantly dying and being replaced, and this is a point on which science and Buddhism agree. When you get right down to it, what is our self? Especially when you consider that our bodies replace many of their nearly 30 trillion human cells regularly. About 330 billion of those cells are replaced every day. That's about 1% of all of our body's cells. Unlike the digital world where we can make endless, perfect copies of Enter the Sandman until we get sued by Metallica, each time our body divides a cell, a part of it is lost. Think of it like making a copy of a copy on a physical copy machine. Do they still make those? No? All right, moving on. The end cap of DNA sequences and proteins at the end of our chromosomes is called a telomere, and each time a cell divides, the telomere shrinks. When enough of the telomere is gone, the cell can no longer divide. The cell dies, and we age. In theory, an enzyme called telomerase can rebuild our telomeres, which is why some scientists have believed that telomerase could be the key to stopping or reversing aging. It turns out lobsters have a basically infinite supply of this enzyme. The discovery of how chromosomes are protected by telomeres and the enzyme telomerase was such a big deal that over a decade ago, a group of scientists actually won the Nobel Prize for it. It turns out the limit of how many times a cell can divide before dying off is called the Hayflick limit. Now, it's easy to understand why some believe that if we could just increase this limit or increase the size of telomeres, we could delay or even stop aging. Just like giving spinach to Popeye or feeding more radioactive spiders to Spider-Man. Couldn't we just pump our cells full of telomerase to rebuild the telomeres and presto, live forever? Well, not so fast, smart guy. Dr. Lindsay Wu, head of the Laboratory for Aging Research at UNSW, said, "My main reason for being skeptical of this strategy is that telomerase is not normally expressed in most adult cells, but it is often turned on in cancer cells, helping maintain the immortality of cancer. Turns out that cells that have telomeres and can indeed replicate forever are called cancer. Womp womp. And you thought playing God was easy. Tired of looking like crap? Try telomerase. Warning side effects may include cancer, eternal suffering, and more cancer. Of course, it's not all that bad. It's just something to be ironed out, right? Something we can figure out in time. Right now, Sierra Sciences and BioViva, two companies looking into telomeres as the fountain of youth, potentially, believe that we can turn back our age by decades at least. BioViva's CEO, Elizabeth Parrish, claimed a few years back that the biological age of her immune cells had been dialed back by about 20 years by their gene therapy treatment. Is it true? Who cares? This is a YouTube video, not some kind of science book thingy. Let's be honest. You're not going to look it up, are you? So maybe if we can prevent cells from dying, we can prevent our cells from aging and also dying. It's possible, but there's one thing we can all agree on. Any such treatments are and will be insanely expensive for the foreseeable future, meaning it's not going to help you or me anytime soon. Next, let's talk about gene therapy and CRISPR. As two of my podcast guests from MIT and Harvard pointed out, telomeres is so early 2010s. There are around 7,000 rare diseases or diseases that could potentially be impacted by gene therapy. One of the big recent breakthroughs in science is understanding CRISPR better, or how bacteria and other organisms store a part of their attacker in their genetic code so they can defend against them later. Think of it like how our immune system is more effective at defeating something that it's already defeated in the past. Or think of it like those photographs in the 7-Eleven telling the manager to never let Gary in the store again after he did those unspeakable things to the Slurpee machine. If a vaccine works by preemptively preparing our body for a disease before we've had it, what if we could make a personalized vaccine for your body, individually? What if we could make cuts directly to our DNA or inject code into your genes to prevent diseases like sickle cell anemia, which is happening right now? This would open up an entirely new frontier for erasing genetic disorders and treating cancer in far less aggressive ways than chemotherapy. Guests on my podcast Beat the Often Path, like Omar Abudaya and Jonathan Gutenberg of MIT, have made tremendous strides in this area. You can follow their groundbreaking work at the abugutlab.org website. Even though they theorize that we would live much, much longer, Morgan Levine says only 10 to 30% of our lifespan is estimated to be due to genetics, in a piece in The Guardian. You know what else matters? All that boring stuff like not drinking, smoking, exercising, not eating junk food. This means that telomeres aside, if you want to live longer, you should probably skip your evening swims through radioactive waste or the Hudson River. But of course, here's the kicker. A paper in Science Direct states that being poor lowers one's life expectancy by about 10 years, which is roughly the same as chronic smoking. That's true. So how would this compound if our average life expectancy went up by a few decades? Hold on to this thought, if you will, for just a moment. In Homo Deus by Yuval Harari, he theorizes that humans might become something like the Greek gods of old. We might never die of natural causes, but we could still be killed or wounded by an arrow to the knee. I know what you're thinking. Sure, stop me from dying of natural causes so I can increase the odds of getting struck by lightning significantly. Well, aren't you a cheeky little daredevil? So, if lobsters, telomeres, and our habits can teach us about the limits of our physical body, what about skipping our bodies altogether? Shouldn't I be able to just upload my brain like uploading an AOL CD to the modem of my Macintosh Performa? What? 30 years ago, you say? Jeez. Curse you, aging! Curse you! Can we upload our minds? Talking about AOL and modems will sound profoundly boomerish to anybody who uses a computer or phone today, but when we talk about uploading our minds, we're all equally ignorant right now. What makes you think that our consciousness is localized in our brains only? What makes you think that our software could live in a robot with completely different sensory inputs? What would your consciousness do in the absence of eyes, skin, a metabolism, a nose? What would your brain tell you to breathe when you no longer have lungs?
You think that's air you're breathing now?
The idea that we can drag and drop our consciousness into something else is enticing, I'll admit, but it's also far away from reality right now. In addition to mapping every single neuron of every single brain successfully, we'd have to be able to put them into the right container, which would mean building a container as complex as the brain itself. Oh, and let's do it without your code getting hacked, modified, or injected with 24/7 unskippable ads that show up behind your eyelids every 15 seconds because Meta willed it upon thee. An article on Medium by Leon Oakwatch explores this topic in depth, bringing up several assumptions that we must make to even consider uploading our minds. First, Leon argues, almost all of us assume that the human mind is contained solely within the brain's structure, which may or may not be true. Second, we all assume that our knowledge of the brain and computers will be strong enough that we'll be able to scan its entirety somehow. And lastly, we assume that our mind's data will somehow be compatible with other hardware and software that we make. It's this last point that is the most unlikely right now, but all of these assumptions should be questioned. For example, what is the probability that a future civilization would even be able to read a CD, let alone display its contents? But this isn't all just theoretical. For just one example, the 2045 initiative, funded by Russian billionaire Dmitry Iskov, claims to legitimately seek to upload humans into robotic avatars by 2045. 2045 seems a little soon to me, since I can't even get my cable guy to come before 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. next Tuesday, but sure, why not? Let's assume that it's possible, which quite honestly, it is. If we can't upload our consciousness per se, it's very likely that we'll be able to emulate a human brain in software. So let's assume that we can do it for the purposes of this discussion. An ominous research paper called The Dark Path to Eternal Life, Machiavellianism Predicts Approval of Mind Upload Technology, says mind upload, making a digital copy of one's brain, is a part of the transhumanistic dream of eternal life and the end of suffering. It is also perceived as a viable route toward artificial general intelligence. However, AI safety research has alerted to one major risk in creating AGI by mind upload, namely that mind upload technology could appeal primarily to callous and selfish individuals who then abuse this technology for their personal gain and potentially at a considerable cost to the welfare of humankind. Woof! The good news is that doesn't sound very likely. And of course, if Metallica couldn't stop Napstroids from bootlegging their MP3s, what are the chances that Beyoncé can stop hackers from stealing her newly uploaded consciousness? Haven't you always wanted to be Beyoncé? Great, you're just one shady forum away from living that dream. But let's be real, if you're a normal human, you're probably scared of living forever, right? If you're enlightened, you're at peace with your own mortality, right? If you've had a good life, you might be okay with bowing out and letting the next generation take over, like Steve Jobs said. So then what kind of person wants to be immortal so badly? Peter Thiel? Larry Ellison? Does that say more about them or more about you or more about us? It turns out that the people most likely to even desire immortality probably have what psychologists call the dark triad, a collection of three interrelated malevolent personality constructs: narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism. In the same Dark Path to Eternal Life paper that I quoted before, the authors say that a pre-registered structural equation model revealed that Machiavellianism, but not psychopathy, was associated with favorable views about mind upload, both directly and indirectly through utilitarian moral attitudes. These results therefore substantiate the concerns voiced by AI safety researchers, namely that mind upload technology could be adopted disproportionately by individuals with an antisocial personality. And that was all a quote. This kind of reminds me of Plato's Republic, in which he asserts only those who do not seek power are qualified to hold it. Or as Douglas Adams inverted in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it is a well-known and much lamented fact that those people who most want to rule people are ipso facto those least suited to do it. Since the first adopters of this tech will be the ultra-wealthy, many of whom probably have the dark triad of personality traits without naming names, it makes you wonder what kind of person seriously wants to live forever. If you think that you want to live as a human forever, I would argue that you probably haven't thought it all the way through yet, but hey, you do you, boo. Because let's say you do upload your consciousness to a server. Do you think that you'll be in control of that server? Or will Amazon own it and rent your own consciousness to you? Do you think that you'll control your own digital body free from hackers, malware, corporation, or governmental control, or any other factor that could change your free will from wanting to surf to wanting to buy more smooth, satisfying cigarettes? Do you have enough confidence in any possible technological solution to immortality to commit your eternal consciousness, the one and only thing you truly own in this whole world, to it? Knowing that conscious eternity is either the literal definition of heaven or hell, depending solely on what it is and whether you can escape it or not. So in summary, understanding ourselves better. I love thinking about the future, and let's not forget that there is so much more to discover about our brain and our relationship to the universe. Even if we fall short of the mark of prolonging our life or uploading our brains, the serious research done in these fields will yield an incredible understanding of how our bodies, brains, and consciousness even work. This knowledge will have untold benefits for us, however long our lives may be. But there is a huge gap between scientific research and scammers collecting millions from people while offering them a vague, potentially negligent promise in return. There are a lot of unethical people in this space selling the gullible on a dream they know isn't very likely to ever happen. After all, wouldn't you pay a couple $1 million for a 0.0000002 chance that you will wake up in Futurama one day? In our society, we can't talk about any tech like this without talking about who can afford it and, more importantly, who can't. And it's clear that if life extension and immortality are possible, they might give a game-changing advantage to the people who get there first. Our concept of compound interest and wealth and value go completely out the window when someone can accumulate wealth tax-free forever. This basically dooms every new generation to a form of slavery and poverty that they could never understand. Political think tankers like Frank Luntz have built a career from changing words like the estate tax to the death tax to scare people away from passing meaningful reform on generational wealth. But if a billionaire never dies, there's no death tax and there's no generationalness. Their wealth could just keep on growing forever. Kids today already believe that they may never be able to own a home. Now imagine when all of Beverly Hills is owned by people who are 500 years old or older. What then? Oh, that's already the case? Well, I'll be. New babies won't even stand a chance. So what kind of person would you have to be to want an eternal unfair advantage over your fellow man? Sounds like somebody who might have Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy to me, but hey, what do I know? I'm not a billionaire, so I'm probably just jealous.